This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha. This week we've got another great video, and you can see the title of it right on your screen. My wife had another man's baby. Now I'm forced to pay child support. So let's get right into it. But before we get to the story, gentlemen, I want you to consider this a public service announcement to check the laws of your state pertaining to paternity before getting married. Marriage is a business contract that generally does not favor males. It generally does not favor males in terms of division of assets. It doesn't favor males in terms of custody battles. And it definitely, as you're going to see from this story, doesn't favor males when it comes to these kind of paternity situations. So let's get into the story. The original poster says, the events I'll be discussing here happened to me 8 years ago in 2014. I'm going to use pseudonames for everyone involved for obvious reasons. I'm 39 years old and have been happily married to my current wife for 4 years now. I'll be referring to me as Eric and to my wife as Jill, age 29. So he's 10 years older than his wife. Jill and I have 2 boys, ages 1 and 3. I also have 4 older children, 3 boys and a girl, ages 17 male, 15 female, 14 male, and 10 male from my previous marriage to Amber, age 39. Most of my story is going to be centered around the 10-year-old. I'll call him Seth. I want to start out by going back about 11 years ago. At the time, Amber and I had 3 kids with a 4th, Seth, on the way. We were happy, but life was hectic as not only did we have a young family, I also had recently taken on more responsibility at work. This enabled us to buy a house, a SUV and van, and enabled Amber to be a stay-at-home mom. It did unfortunately require long hours, including weekends, but I always made quality time for my family and did more than my share of caring for the kids and tending to chores. Throughout our marriage, Amber always appeared to be happy and told everyone she was, but at times it seemed like she was overwhelmed. In those times, I always stepped in and did more, as did our parents and her sister. Whenever she needed a break, she could take one. What I'm saying is she had lots of help from all of us. I also want to make it known that having 4 kids was a mutual decision, mostly driven by Amber. Amber gave birth to Seth and everything was going well, although things were even more crazy than before. Chaos was routine with us, and to add to the mix, Amber also got a puppy for our kids. This again was Amber's idea, as my 3 older kids wanted one and kept begging her for one. There was never a dull moment, as our home was always full of kids, a dog, and our extended families, and I loved it. As time went on, it was apparent that Seth didn't look like me, my wife, my other kids, or anyone in either of our families. He had blonde hair, vivid blue eyes, and a light complexion, while the rest of the family had black or dark brown hair, brown eyes, and darker skin, as both Amber and I are half Italian. I know this doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it stuck in my head for some reason. So there again, his gut is telling me, or telling him, something is up. Our parents and friends occasionally even made jokes saying Amber must have had an affair with the postman or something like that. It was all in good fun, as they meant nothing by it, and we all just laughed. As time went on, Seth's features became more distinct. To make a long story short, one day before he was 2, I secretly took him and got DNA tested. The results came back indicating Seth wasn't my son. That was the worst day of my life, and I cried hard for obvious reasons, but wasn't totally shocked. I talked to the clinic and asked if these tests are ever wrong. The clinician said very rarely, but recommended we take another test to confirm the initial results. We did, and the results were the same. My life was quickly unraveling, and I had to decide what to do next. Now, wait till you hear what he initially decides to do here. He said, I know a lot of guys are going to give me grief for this, but my initial plan was to do nothing, to just ignore it. My thought was I would try to live life normally to see if I could get past this, and did so for 5 weeks. Now, that's really unusual in this case because he doesn't even know if his wife is still carrying on this affair. So the fact he's just going to rug sweep it without getting to the bottom of it, that's to me, it's crazy. He says, during this time, I never confronted my wife, acted normal, and even had regular S with her. My mind finally got the best of me, and I eventually broke and had the urge to get out fast before I lost it. So he hung with it for 5 weeks, but then, finally he just broke down and he couldn't live like that anymore. I made an appointment with a divorce attorney and gave her all the details, including the DNA test. She asked how my wife reacted, and I told her I had not confronted her because I wasn't sure I wanted a divorce until now. The attorney recommended that I confront her with witnesses to get her side of the story, but I just wanted out and decided not to do it. I knew if I confronted her, I would likely cave and give her another chance instead of going through with a divorce. The attorney asked if I knew who the affair partner was, the AP. I told her I didn't. She recommended I investigate phone records, emails, text, etc. for possible clues. She explained since I was married when Seth was born, now listen to this, I am his legal father under our state laws, even though he's not biologically mine. Now, I don't know what state he's in because he doesn't specify it, but to my understanding, most states are this way, and some are worse than others. She further explained that the only outside chance for getting the court to release me of my parental responsibilities would be if 1, the biofather voluntarily comes forth, or 2, my wife pursues a paternity claim with the biofather. I didn't have time to do the detective work, so I hired a PI my attorney recommended, and in 1 day of going through our computer and cell phone records, he was able to identify the affair partner. The PI evidence determined the affair started on a dating site, the biggest one at the time. Now, this was 8 years ago, so it wasn't Tinder. It probably was, I'm just guessing now, the one that begins with the letter M, that big one that I don't even know if it's still in existence today. Amber set up a profile under the name of Elsa25, and her bio said she was single, had no children, and was looking for casual encounters. Oh my gosh. Now keep in mind, this is a mother of 3 children doing this, folks. The profile was still active on the site, though all the pictures had been deleted. Amber had been exchanging messages with multiple guys on the site for nearly 3 months. He says it was disgusting. Most of the exchanges were just small talk and mild flirting, with the exception of the man she had the affair with. Let's call him Bob. He lived 23 miles away and worked the 3 to 11 shift at a factory. Like Amber, he was home during the day, so that's when they communicated and when they had their fun at his apartment. All their communications were done via the dating site. By the way, Seth looks just like Bob. Amber told him she didn't have a phone, claiming she lost hers and hadn't replaced it. She obviously did this so she couldn't be tracked. You can see from the messages she abruptly cut contact with him after their 3rd date. So this woman, she can't come back to him later and say, oh, it was just a big mistake, something I did at the spur of the moment. No, this was a really well thought out plan, and she even had a plan for covering her tracks so she couldn't be traced by the guy she was having an affair with. Bob continued sending her messages, but she never responded, and eventually he gave up. Amber unknowingly had message notifications from the dating site sent to a Yahoo email account. She never checked the email account but stayed signed into it. So when the PI went to yahoo.com as one of his standard checks, the emails all popped up on the screen. Hiring this guy was the best $950 I ever spent. So he spent $950 on just one day's worth of work. Man, I got to look into potentially becoming a private investigator if that's the case. With the evidence he uncovered and the DNA test, I had all the ammunition I needed for an at-fault divorce and gave the attorney the go-ahead to move forward. Now, we're at a point in the story where I want to encourage you, if you're liking what you hear, hit that like button, because what that will do is move this video up on the YouTube algorithm and get it seen by people all over the planet. Now, let's get back to our story. I plan to serve Amber in the presence of both of our parents. Some may think this was a weak way to do it, but I didn't trust my wife at this point and was afraid she may do something crazy or falsely accuse me if we were alone. I actually think that's smart because, again, you don't know what kind of, actions this woman may take. As they say, a cornered animal becomes dangerous. And in this case, her hearing that, hey, you're going to divorce her, she may do something crazy. So I think he's smart by having his parents and his in-laws there as witnesses. I advised my parents of the situation ahead of time so they wouldn't be blindsided and could support me. The meeting was intense. I was nervous as HELL, but didn't break down. I first presented the DNA results. Then I gave them copies of key messages between Amber and Bob. Her parents were visibly upset, as were my parents. Amber just looked at me dazed with a sad, "I'm sorry" look and wept quietly. I think she mentally snapped that day, perhaps PTSD, as she's never been quite the same since. Yeah, I can imagine because she probably thought, man, I really got away with all of this and my life is normal and it's great. And then all of a sudden he hits her with this out of left field. After things settled down in the room, Amber started saying she was very sorry and asked that I forgive her because she loved me and our family more than anything. I told her I forgave her, but then proceeded to hand her the separation agreement and explained that I wanted to legally separate for 6 months. I told her I wanted her to stay with her parents for the next 2 weeks to give me space to think. I explained she could then move back and serve the rest of the legal separation in our house. But one of my parents would be staying with us at all times as I no longer trust her. I then handed her the divorce agreement and told her she needs to get a lawyer. This is when she became inconsolable. Her mom asked if there was any way to avoid divorce. I firmly said no. Her mom then said her actions were terrible, but were not significant enough to end a great marriage and break up a beautiful family. I told her she cheated, had another man's baby, and lied to me for over 2 years. How much more significant can you get than that? They eventually left and we went through the separation with my wife pleading with me multiple times a day not to divorce. During the separation period, my attorney was able to connect with Bob. He was very apologetic, stating he didn't know Elsa, now remember that was the fake name that this Amber gave when she was on the dating site, was married. He explained that he had no intentions of breaking up a family and barely had enough money to support himself. There was no way this guy could support a child. It was clear the idea of having him voluntarily assume paternal responsibilities wasn't happening. As for the reason for the affair, Amber's sister told me Amber said she set up the dating profile just to get attention from men and had no intentions of cheating. She claims to have felt ugly after gaining weight after having 3 kids and wanted to see if other men still found her attractive. Note, he says, never once did I ever criticize her weight or looks, and always told her she was beautiful, because to me, she truly was. But you know what? She probably looked at him as like, yeah, he's my husband, so he's going to say I'm beautiful. I want to hear it from these strange men. I want to see if other men still think I'm attractive. It's crazy, but women will do this. Jumping forward 8 months, and our divorce was final. My attorney petitioned the court to split assets evenly, but requested no alimony and child support only for my 3 biological kids, even though she knew the judge would likely not accept this. The judge said, since I am Seth's legal father, I would be required to pay child support for him as well. She did strike alimony from the settlement based on the infidelity and the affair child. Now, that is very surprising because remember, this Amber is a stay-at-home mom. So she doesn't have any ongoing income outside of this, child support she's going to be receiving. So it's surprising that that judge struck the alimony. She also let me keep the house. That's also surprising as part of the settlement, but awarded Amber 51% primary custody. At the end of the verdict, the judge asked Amber and I if we had any questions or comments. Amber said she just wanted to tell me again she was sorry, that she still loved me, and hoped one day we'd be together again. I then spoke up and thanked the judge for her thoughtful verdict and for allowing me to speak. I then said the family court laws in our state are unjust and are totally biased against men. I asked, how is it fair when a woman cheats, has a baby with another man, lies about it to her husband, and then not only does she get primary custody of his children, he is forced to pay support for a kid that's not even his. The judge said she empathized with me, but explained that she follows the law and acts in the best interest of children. She said the best interest of the child here is for me to continue to be Seth's father. She said she can see that I am a good man and a great father, and that's why she gave me 49% custody and allowed me to retain the family home. Now, my question would have been, why didn't you give me 51% custody and let me retain the family home? So that 51-49, even though it doesn't seem like a big difference, it is, because she now is controlling, really where that family stays. She said the only way the court would absolve me of my legal parental responsibility is if the biological father were to voluntarily come forward and take on that responsibility. She said even if this were to occur, there's no guarantee the court would allow this, as the biological father would need to be thoroughly screened, including for his mental and financial fitness. I then told the judge, I've already provided the court with the biological father's name and address. Isn't that enough to at least issue a court order to have him DNA tested? The judge explained this is a civil matter and the courts do not intervene like that. She said either I or my ex-wife would need to convince the bio father to voluntarily come forward, or the mother could file a paternity lawsuit against the bio father. My wife's attorney spoke up at this point and said her client didn't want another man in her child's life and that Seth already has a great father. I concluded my statement as at this point it felt like everyone in the courtroom was basically just telling me, tough luck, sucker, deal with it. I wanted to highlight this courtroom exchange to encourage any man contemplating marriage to first research the laws in your state. The hearing ended and I was divorced. I went forward and paid my child support and was the best father I could be to all of my kids, including Seth. You'd think I'd treat him differently based on what occurred, but to me, he was my son and I was the only father he'd ever known, and I loved him. A few years later, I met and married Jill, and we had our 2 boys. So now I have 6 kids and couldn't be happier. I thank the Lord every day for blessing me with my children and for bringing Jill into my life when he did. As for Amber, I've long since forgiven her. She spends most of her time these days being a mother and caring for her aging parents. She's gained a lot of weight since the divorce and recently was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and now takes daily medication for it. Up until I got serious with Jill, Amber tried everything to win me back. She even went as far as trying to get the kids to convince me, which I quickly shut down that manipulation tactic. Over the years, she's apologized hundreds of times and says the affair was the worst thing she's ever done. Well, that's obvious. He says we're cool now and on good terms, and co-parenting with her has been smooth. She's planning to go to school to become an LPN as she will need a source of reliable income once the child support starts expiring in a few years when each kid turns 18. Because remember, that's the only income she's getting. So she's living like the kids off of that child support. She's also still driving the 11-year-old van she got in the divorce settlement, which will soon need to be replaced. Over the years, Amber has dated a few older men, but nothing serious. I guess it's tough dating when you're a woman with 4 kids, he says. That's all I've got to say. I again leave you with these words of wisdom. If you're a man who's thinking about getting married, first step back, cool your jets, and make sure you've got a good woman. Then check the family laws in your state before potentially making a decision you'll regret somewhere down the line. So that's the end of his story. I thought it was a great story, and I think he handled this as well as you can handle it. Now, some guys are going to criticize him for, taking on the father figure role with the child Seth. I don't fault him for that because, again, like he explained, he was that child's father for, the kid's whole life for those 2 years. He bonded with that kid. He loves the kid. I will never criticize a man for doing what he did there. So I think that is not a sign of weakness. I think that's a sign of strength. And I think he handled the situation very well. Basically, he divorced his wife. He divorced her immediately. He has a good working relationship with her now. He's a great father. As you can see, he's got 6 kids. So this guy's going to be busy for many, many years. And overall, I think he handled this very well. But I want to hear from you. How do you think he handled this situation? Would you have done something differently? What do you think about these state laws that default a husband as being the father of a child, even though a child may not be biologically his? What do you think about that? What do you think can be done to change those laws that are grossly unfair? Also, again, reminding you, if you like this video, please hit that like button, share it with your friends, and please subscribe to this great channel, and I will talk to you on the next one.